Hi, I'm Celia Cody. I take environmental science, and today I'm going to be presenting on Yosemite National Park in Sierra Nevada, California. So, Yosemite's ecology and community. Yosemite has a lush ecosystem with many biotic and abiotic factors. The park has over 400 species of animals, many kinds of plants, one third of which are found in the meadows, and the great towering sequoia trees. Abiotic factors include the beautiful Yosemite Falls, which is the tallest waterfall in North America, the Granite Mountains, Half Dome, and Mount Lyell, and the glaciers, Lyell and McClure. Yosemite's high biodiversity means it also has complex community ecology. Producers and decomposers such as plants, flowers, and insects make up the bottom of the food chain. Pika, the Pacific tree frog, and deer are examples of primary consumers. This is a little pika, and this is a deer. Secondary consumers, such as the raven, ringtail, and black-tipped jackrabbit, eat the primary consumers and producers. Lastly, on the top of the food chain, there are coyotes, mountain lions, and bobcats. These animals are hereditary consumers. Here are the great sequoia trees, Yosemite Falls, granite structures, glaciers, and Yosemite Valley. Hydrology and the water cycle. Water affects every aspect of Yosemite from the landscape to the great sequoias, but how does it move through Yosemite? Number 1, the orographic effect. Warm air brought to Yosemite from the Pacific Ocean storms are forced to higher elevations due to the high Sierra Nevada peaks. This air quickly cools and condenses, falling as rain or snow. This snow stays on the mountain as snowpack until the spring. In the spring, rising temperatures causes the snowpack to melt, and that's number 2. The water travels down from the high peaks and saturates soil while filling the rivers and streams of Yosemite. Next, during the spring pulse, the water levels rise. This pulse causes streams and rivers to fill wetlands and meadows and brings nutrients and sediments along with it. Water is used, step number 4. Plants, such as the great sequoia trees, are watered by this yearly cycle, and some animals, like amphibians, use the spring pulse to lay their eggs in flooded meadows. Humans also use this water to drink, as Yosemite supplies 1/3 of California's fresh water. This water is considered one of Yosemite's ecosystem services. Back to the beginning. The water goes back into the atmosphere through the processes of evaporation, sublimation, or transpiration. An important thing to note, glaciers in Yosemite also make up for a lot of water found in the water cycle. These glaciers were formed during the Little Ice Age. These glaciers, Lyell and McClure, supply year-round cold water to the Tuolumne River once snowpack has already melted. With climate change, it is sadly suspected that these glaciers will disappear in a few decades. Granite. Granite is formed when oceanic tectonic plates slide under continental plate in a phenomenon called subduction. Even though Yosemite Park isn't located on the coast of California, once upon a time it was. Subduction zones usually occur in places with volcanoes. After subduction occurs, the less dense magma, grouped together in plutons, is expelled from the volcanoes. In Yosemite, granite, along with other rocks, were expelled from these volcanoes and at the surface. But during the Ice Age, all the weaker rock was pushed away by the glaciers, leaving the smooth, huge granite structures behind. Endangered species. There used to be 10,000 bighorn sheep in the area that is today Yosemite National Park. When settlers moved west to California in the gold rush, the domestic sheep they brought gave the diseases to the longhorn sheep that they didn't have resistance to. Population got as low as 100 bighorn sheep in the 1990s, but efforts by environmentalists have brought this number back up to 600 longhorn sheep. Yosemite consists of 2 biomes split down the middle. On the left-hand side of the park, there is a temperate forest biome, and on the right side of the park, there is mountainous taiga biome. So now I'm going to talk about the IEP trip. So now I'm going to be presenting the Yosemite National Park IEP trip for Loomis students that will hopefully be able to take place next year. So, location of Yosemite. Yosemite is located in the Sierra Nevada mountains in eastern central California. The Sierra Nevada mountain range stretches across the east side of California over here, and the park is 1,200 square miles. Because it's a good 2,800 miles away from Loomis's campus, students will need to fly to get here. Etymology. So the name Yosemite comes from the Native American word Yosemite, or grizzly bear. The Awanichi people, who originally inhabited the park of Yosemite, were skilled bear hunters. So the Caucasians who came to the park called them Yosemite, and then that name became transferred to the name of the park. History of Yosemite. The indigenous natives of Yosemite lived there for nearly 3,000 years, but there is traces of human activity in the park from 8,000, 10,000 years ago. The most prominent natives called themselves the Awanichi. The gold rush in California of the 19th century brought many European Americans to the Yosemite area, causing tensions between the natives and the other people between resources and land. Like many awful stories we hear about the settling of modern day America, the natives were violently forced out of Yosemite and made to relocate in Fresno, California. The fight was caused by the Mariposa Battalion, led by Army Major Jim Savage, against the Awanichi people. In the mid-1800s, a group of artists toured Yosemite and made the first publications about it through magazine articles. Camps and companies were made to bring people to the area, and also the Transcontinental Railroad also brought a lot of people across California more easily than before. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln created the Yosemite Grant, making Yosemite the first park land to be preserved for public use. And it was the leading drive in making Yellowstone the first national park in 1872. In 1916, Yosemite was recognized as a national park. Famous sites. Yosemite is famous for its one-of-a-kind, beautiful biodiversity. The park's massive granite structures, waterfalls, valleys, great sequoia trees, and glaciers are one of a kind. The Yosemite Valley is the most accessible location in the park, carved out by giant glaciers that moved through the park during the Ice Age. Towering granite structures can be seen from the valley, more specifically Half Dome and El Capitan. The granite that makes up these peaks comes from underground magma, and these peaks were also carved out by glaciers, making them some of the most challenging climbs for world-renowned rock climbers. Yosemite Falls, the tallest waterfall in North America, is made up of 3 separate ledges spanning over 2,450 feet from top to bottom. This waterfall is especially beautiful in the spring due to the snowpack melt. Mariposa Grove, one of Yosemite's 3 sequoia groves, is home to more than 500 giant sequoia trees. The grizzly giant, a 2,995-year-old great sequoia, is a magnificent testament to the history of Yosemite. Lastly, Yosemite's 2 remaining glaciers, formed during the Little Ice Age, are still on Yosemite's highest peaks, supplying the park with year-long cold water. So here are my activities that I've planned for the IEP trip. So activity 1, seek knowledge. So during activity number 1, students will do a hand gliding tour of Yosemite Valley with a trained professional. While hand gliding over the park, Loomis students will experience Yosemite from a bird's eye view, getting an aerial experience of the beautiful biodiversity of the park. The guide will fly them by the glacial structures of the park over the valley, by Yosemite Falls, and to see the great sequoia's great height from a distance. The tour will start from the peak of Glacier Point. So this will be a very cool, like once in a lifetime experience for students to hand glide over the park. But if they don't want to, they don't have to. And the students will wear GoPros. So if some students are too afraid to do it, they can watch the GoPro footage. So activity number 2, enhance understanding. During activity number 2, students will see the physical marks of human activity and climate change on the park. Students will hike to McClure Glacier and go down into it, seeing how it has physically moved from the wall of the mountain, quite a few feet. Next, in the Mariposa Grove, students will conduct an experiment on the sequoia needles, first climbing into the trees with rock climbing equipment to pick needles from the lowest vegetation. So as you can see, the vegetation doesn't start up till kind of a little bit up the tree. And then they will use a pressurizer to find the stress levels of the tree. So you put the pine needle in the pressurizer and use pressure. And at a certain point, if the pine needle releases water earlier, it means the tree is under more stress because the leaf isn't able to hold water as easily. So that will show them the stress level of the tree. Students will question why these great Asian trees are under stress. Activity number 3 is develop skills. During activity number 3, students will meet with a park ranger to discuss the effects of climate change on the park. Using their insight from the disappearance of glaciers and the hotter, drier summers Yosemite is enduring, students will collaboratively link the stress of the trees to a lack of water in Yosemite in the water cycle of the park. The park ranger will then also teach them about natural fires in the park, specifically the native people's annual ritual of controlled fires to burn out some of the vegetation, and how in the 1900s people tried to stop all fires from burning. Students will collectively link this to the stress of the great sequoias as well. So here we have the great sequoia trees. That's a person, so you can see how really huge they are. This is a fire burning in Yosemite. Fires by the native people helped clear out the vegetation of the park. And here, so this actually isn't like a before and after. This is just during the spring and not during the spring. So you can see a lot more water during the spring. Activity 4 is taking action. While back at Loomis, students will design a fundraiser of their choice to raise money for research of climate change in Yosemite. Students may design a shirt or hat, host a fun event, or have a dress down day for Yosemite. Students will also work with environmental science teachers back at Loomis to do a similar test of the stress levels of trees in the meadows. This data will go into Loomis's files so that the experiment can be done again in later years. Thank you.